Yo, I got a pair of Jordan 4 SBs that I'm going to be turning into military 4s. So the reason why I'm doing this is because Jordan Brand hasn't retroed the military 4 with the Nike Air branding yet, but the colorways with the Nike Air branding do not have the original shape. So I wanted to make one for myself. I got the tabs from Levels Restoration. The blue looks amazing, but the gray is the wrong color. It's a little bit too dark, so I'm going to need to change that before I stitch it on the shoe. I'm also going to be using parts from a military 4 from 06. I'm going to be taking the netting, the blue netting, the outsole, the tongue tag, and the tongue liner. So my first step is to remove the uppers on the SB4s by using a lot of heat. What helped me out a lot is heating up a flat head with a heat gun to wedge in between the leather and the sole. I'm also using a blow dryer on high inside of the shoes to heat up the glue from the inside out. I got these militaries on eBay for around 40 bucks. I didn't care what condition the uppers were, as long as the netting and the tongue tag were in good condition. That's all I wanted. I'm gonna start extracting all the parts I need with an X-Acto knife. The plastic netting is glued onto the fabric, so I'm using a lot of acetone and heat to separate the plastic netting. After taking out the parts on the military 4, I'm going to start taking out the pieces that I don't need on the SB4. I am reusing the Jordan SB tongue because the military tongue color is different, so it's going to look weird. So now that I have all the parts out, it's time to put the pieces together. This is actually pretty easy since there's already a guideline on where to stitch. And I'm just going to finish stitching up the tongue. This was my first time really using the Chinese patcher machine on this type of job, so I really messed up on the stitching. So the top thread kept getting bundled underneath the material, and after some research I just needed to increase the tension on the top thread, and now I don't have that issue anymore. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the color of the wing is the wrong color. So before I paint the wing, I'm going to sand it down and add adhesion promoter. This is for the paint to bond with rubber. I'm also going to add 2 hard to my paint. This will help bond with the rubber and increase hardness. And to finish it off, I'm going to protect the paint with flat 4-coat varnish from Angelus. All I have to do now is just stitch the pieces back together. I'm just going to use existing stitch lines as my guideline. The blue crowns and tongue are being held together by double-sided tape and glue. With how the shoe is made, I have to stitch it all at the same time. Now that I got all the pieces stitched to the upper, I'm going to start removing the donors. I'm using a Dub Zero as my donor, and I'm just using hot boiling water to separate the uppers from the midsole. To remove the outsole, I'm just using a heat gun and acetone to help me melt the glue off. The outsoles were worn but not too beat, so I'm just gonna give them a good cleaning. What sucks is that this part broke, so I'm just gonna use super glue to attach it back together. Alright, so this is the most dumbest thing ever. One of the donors isn't fitting to the outsole correctly. There's a little bit of a gap, but the right shoe fits perfectly. There's no gaps at all. I'm just gonna have to finesse the midsole on the outsole to make it fit. So this is the other donor. It fits perfect. There's no issues, but I still wanted to see if another donor would work. So I got a pair of Flight 89s as a donor. And when I put the Flight 89 midsole on the outsole, it fit perfect. I'm like, cool, there's no gaps, this is gonna work. But when I put it on the upper, that's a whole different type of problem. The sidewalls on the Flight 89 is smaller than an Air Jordan 4. So it's not gonna cover the exposed leather that's been shaven down by a Dremel. So I'm pretty much forced to use the Dub Zero as a donor. This is the super glue that I'm using, high strength, professional grade. I'm gonna apply the super glue and let it cure for a full 24 hours before I do anything with the sole. And I'm just doing a light stress test, and it worked pretty good. Alright, now that all the issues have been resolved, I'm going to start gluing the donor to the outsole. I'm using Barge Cement Super Stick. I'm going to apply a thin layer on both sides, let it cure for 10 to 15 minutes, reheat it with the blow dryer, and clamp them together. There's a fitment issue with the donor sole, so I'm going to manipulate the upper by splitting the, what's it called again? The lasting board? No, the strobel board. This will help me make it more narrow and have it fit on the donor. Okay, so now it's time to paint the midsoles using Angelus paint. To get that nice factory look, I'm going to be airbrushing the paint on the midsole. While I was airbrushing the blue paint, halfway through airbrushing, I noticed that the tape was lifted up. I was like, fuck. The paint seeped through. So when this happens, you have to act fast. I just get a wet Q-tip or cotton ball and just wipe it off. I just use plain water. You don't want to use rubbing alcohol or acetone because that's going to take off all the paint that you put on. It's not going to take out that cream color base coat that I put on already because it's already fully dried. I'm going to use sand varnish on the midsoles since I noticed that all the 89s have like a shiny midsole. You see that sheen? I always thought that it had a matte coat, but I guess I was wrong. I'm going to trace the midsole with a heat disappearing pen and then use my Dremel tool to remove any excess leather that will affect my reglue. Once that's done, I'm going to start applying glue on my uppers and on the midsole. To glue the uppers, I'm going to follow the same steps I did with the midsole and outsole. I'm going to reactivate the glue with the blow dryer and bond them together. Now the last step is to re-stitch the toe cap to the uppers, and I'm using a sewing awl. And that's it for this colorway conversion on the SB4 to a military 4. It was a lot of work. I made a lot of mistakes. In the end, I'm happy on how they turned out. This is the closest we'll see a military 4 in the original shape until they re-release the reimagined 4s next year. What do you guys think? Was it worth destroying 3 pairs of shoes to make one colorway? Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next video.